Hi everyone, I'm Nora Pearson. I'm a master's student at the University of Minnesota's Department of Soil, Water, and Climate, and today I'll be talking about how NRCS and university partnerships can work for completing urban soil survey projects. NRCS and Nick Jelinski's lab at the University of Minnesota are partnering to update the Twin Cities metropolitan area soil survey. So here's a quick bit of background on our project specifically. We're covering a subset of the 7-county Twin Cities metro. The area of interest is outlined in black on this figure. Downtown Minneapolis is kind of in the center of it. Downtown St. Paul is directly to the east. Note that our area of interest for the project is dominated by residential and commercial and industrial land uses, so the reds and the oranges. And we've trimmed out a lot of the agricultural area that's in the southern portion of the Twin Cities. So we are focusing on the urban core of the Twin Cities. This is important because a majority of soil data requests come from urban areas, so we need to have extensive, good quality data to provide. Existing soil survey products for this area lack a significant amount of data. We have a lot of that urban land and UDORTHENT components. So when folks look at something like Web Soil Survey, they don't see an assigned soil series or the lab data or interpretations that come with that, which makes existing products kind of unusable. Through this partnership, we are collecting additional point data and doing a DSP project, but also NRCS and the university are getting some technical support and training resources, as well as participating in some community outreach. So because we're working with the university and NRCS are working together, we can do a little bit more than only a traditional soil survey. Timeline-wise, fieldwork is happening between 2024 and 2026 with progressive correlation, meaning we are creating concepts and map units as fieldwork is happening, and we estimate that the final survey will be published in 2027. This project is definitely not the first urban soil survey project or update, but I think it's the first that has included a university partnership to this extent, where the university is not just taking on a research role, like completing a couple of research projects on the side of the urban soil survey, but we are actually doing profile descriptions in the field, doing some of the lab work for this project, helping with map unit creation, that kind of thing. Broadly, the goal of NRCS working with the university is to harness the resources and expertise of both groups. So with that introduction, I'll go through the roles that we each have in the project. We'll start with NRCS. NRCS provides the technical expertise in soil survey methodology and knowledge of topics specific to urban soil survey, like human transported material and artifacts in soil. How do we describe those things, and how do they fit into the current taxonomic system? With that expertise, NRCS staff have trained university staff and students on field methods, like how to complete a profile description and kind of the ancillary data that needs to be collected along with that, and on lab methods like MIR or mid-infrared spectroscopy, which is in that middle photo on the bottom. NRCS provides guidance and collaborates on sampling site locations, things like sampling on private versus public lands and making sure we're covering all geomorphic surfaces across the area of interest. They provide technical guidance on documentation procedures to assure that all project results are captured in NRCS-supported database format. They provide quality control, quality assurance as necessary to assure that everything meets NCSS standards. They quality control all of our PEDON data, our tabular data population into NASIS, and facilitate the data transfer into NASIS. They provide guidance to define map unit concepts and summarize the soil properties, all of that are needed to develop map units, data map units, and generate interps. NRCS is also providing fieldwork support. They're completing profile descriptions with and without university teams, and also work with us through field reviews and field assists as requested. The University of Minnesota brings the bulk of the field and laboratory work teams. During the summer, we have 3 to 5 full-time undergraduate students that are doing both field work, collecting profile descriptions, and lab work. We have 2 or 3 full-time research staff, as well as myself on the project as a graduate student and Nick Jelinski on as PI. We have laboratory space on the University of Minnesota campus for sample processing, analysis, and archive. So that includes pulverizing samples, particle size analysis, pH, PXRF. The University of Minnesota has soil data from the past 7 to 10 years of direct sampling across the Twin Cities metro. That's not by genetic horizon, that's more depth-based incremental sampling, but it will be incorporated into soil survey products. Finally, we also have established networks, kind of a bunch of connections with landowners and land managers across the Twin Cities, which helps us access field sites, but also provides an avenue for community outreach, which that's one of the parts of the project I'm super excited about. The project directly supports our community engagement activities, which allows us to do exciting things like topsoil drop-offs to community gardens and urban farms using our PXRF, portable X-ray fluorescence, in the field to scan soil in real time, talk to folks about lead contamination. We can attend the events that our community organization partners host, provide like volunteer time to set up and tear down those events, to talk to people about urban ag. All of that means, though, that we get to talk to people in a metropolitan area about soil survey, about where to find their soil data, how to grow food in soil, contaminant distribution, and more, which is exciting and kind of a unique part for this to go along with a soil survey. Takeaways. This project is working so well because we're using the complementary strengths of both groups. I talked about the NRCS providing technical expertise, the university providing personnel capacity, NRCS providing technical assistance, both of us providing training opportunities for the other. I talked about mid-infrared spectroscopy and PXRF. We're able to provide soil data and outreach opportunities that involve our community partners. And I think the project as a whole is a fantastic educational opportunity for undergrads. It's rare for students at the undergrad level or even the grad level to complete profile descriptions in a professional capacity and like before they go work for NRCS, for example. So the project's really exciting in that way. Overall here, I wanted to give a fairly high-level overview of how this partnership is working between NRCS and the University of Minnesota, for us to update the soil survey for the Twin Cities. Thank you very much for listening.
Good morning or afternoon, depending on your location. I'm Francine Laritier. I'm the National Resource Soil Scientist for Dynamic Soil Properties. And today I will be presenting Forward Together, Dynamic Soil Properties. Thank you to all of the organizers for this conference. It's a huge lift to put a conference like this together, especially with the pivot to all virtual. And I'm just so thankful that we can come together and continue to build on our 126-year foundation of the National Cooperative Soil Survey Partnership. I really apologize for the hoarseness of my voice, but I'm glad for this virtual format where we can still share ideas and not germs. Last year, the DSP team provided longer presentations at each of the National Cooperative Soil Survey regional conferences. So this year I'll keep the background brief. And if you want more background, you're welcome to dig up those old recordings and watch those. And then I'll also provide an update on our shared progress and end with a bit of strategy and partnership discussion. So that we all have the same basic understanding, dynamic soil properties, or DSPs, are properties that change with land use, management, and natural disturbance on the human time scale. We're generally talking about years to decades, although some DSPs, such as bulk density, can dramatically be altered with one tillage pass. At only 5 years old, our DSP project type is quite young compared to the 126-year-old history of soil survey. During that time, there has been a significant evolution in our soil survey products. Some of the early soil surveys only included surface texture and color. With time, we added literal depth and complexity to soil surveys to meet the needs of our customers. Dynamic soil properties, or DSPs, have been part of soil survey products for a very long time. One could argue since the beginning. Color, organic matter, bulk density, saturate hydraulic conductivity, to name a few, are already included in our primary product, Surgo. Some important milestones for DSP include the start of the Soil Quality Institute in 1996, Web Soil Survey going live in 2005, and drumming up lots of interest in soil survey, and the publishing of the 2008 Soil Change Guide and the first DSP guide in 2026. So based on the work that we've done with the Customer Experience Division, we know that our customers, they like Surgo, but they also want dynamic soils data. They want to understand data as it relates to specific land uses or ecological sites. So that is, they want data that helps them to understand and interpret how soils change with use and management. So in the last 5 years, we've made tremendous progress with our DSP inventories, and those efforts are part of a continuation of the evolution of soil survey to meet the needs of our customers. The trick is, how do we communicate land use and ecological state dependent soil properties? Well, that is a great segue to progress. Fortunately, our DSP inventories or projects are happening in conjunction with our other soil survey work, including ecological site inventories. And a great framework for communicating dynamic soil properties are our state and transition models. Our DSP projects are actually built around investigating different states, sometimes community phases within a state and transition models. And this visual state and transition model from Stevensville, Texas MLRA office is an example of one of the deliverables at the completion of a DSP project. To date, there are about 340 DSP projects represented on this map with the black diamonds. The blue circles on this map represent the over 3,000 pedons associated with the completed DSP projects thus far. All of these pedons are rich with DSP data. And draw your attention to the colored areas on the map. These are the extent of the components represented in the top 100 DSP projects. Looking at only those top 100 projects, we have a spatial extent of over 67 million acres. So for 5 years of work, while we've been fine-tuning the standards, this is really impressive progress. Now I get to brag a little bit about our DSP focus team. So over the past 5 years, there has been a tremendous amount of work done by the focus team to operationalize DSP. Related to standards, we are on the cusp of having all of the standards related to a DSP project published. Megan Kruger, Ryan Dermody, and Sarah Smith have served as details and have really helped us progress on standards during these first 5 years. The standards sub-team and our 9 task forces have completed the work to get all of the methods in our standard guidance. This includes our National Soil Survey Handbook, the Field Book for Describing and Sampling Soils, and the SSIR 51 Field and Lab Manual. The remaining updates have been completed and we're just waiting for them to be published. I also want to highlight the DSP Guide version 3 that was published in July of last year. So that guide did an incredible job decreasing its size from the prior version. So from the prior version, the 90-page guide, we went down to a 20-page guide. In addition, we added lots of flexibility. For instance, that enables DSP inventory to be layered more easily with different types of projects. The training and support team under Shauna Repking and Lance Howe's capable leadership has developed and implemented training to support DSP inventory from project planning through project completion. So the goal is for all of that, there are dedicated field staff and partners that are really moving these efforts forward in the field to feel supported throughout the inventory process. Kevin Godsey led the database task force. Before he retired, he worked hard truly to the very last minute to ensure that all of the data from DSP projects will be stored in NRCS. That is when NRCS 7.5.1 is published. So many thanks to Jay Scovlin and Kyle Stevens for their support of that work. Sharon Perrone, who took the DRP and we miss dearly, created a data storage repository so that data that doesn't yet have a home in NRCS but will in the future will not be lost in the interim. The data stored there includes that for Saturos and ag stability, really anything that didn't yet have a home in NRCS. And the plan is that it will be able to be imported into NRCS 7.5.1. So the work on data storage is so close to being completed. And other than that, of course, the ongoing population of new inventories into NRCS. We've had many brilliant minds on the issue of data integration, including detailees Kevin Godsey, Matt Bromley, and recently Shauna Burnell Fields. As a result, there is now a roadmap for DSP data integration that we are hopeful will be able to be implemented for the benefit of our conservation programs and our customers. So as you can see, in the first 5 years, there's been just an incredible amount of groundwork completed. And now we're ready for DSP inventory to really take off. And with that, we're going to shift gears and talk about strategy and partnership hand in hand. We have a great opportunity in DSP inventory to provide direct assistance to farmers, ranchers, and forest land owners right now. This is information that everyone wants. Everyone wants to know how soil properties are changed with use, land use, management, and disturbance on a human timescale. As DSP projects are planned, we have resources in the DSP guide and the DSP box on how to layer DSP inventory with other projects and how to enter or create DSP data-rich sites from other observations. If you're completing a technical request or an observation for another purpose, you can still make it a DSP data-rich site by adding some additional information. Early in my career as a field mapper, field soil scientist, I remember taking quite a few quick notes. The assumption at the time was that our primary product was our map and that we needed these quick notes to answer questions so that we can complete our mapping. But looking back, I wish these had been full 232s and entered into NRCS. So I now argue that our primary product is actually our PEDON and our site observations, which can be used more than just for that first original map. The richer the observation, the more value it has for this and future generations of soil survey products. So if land use and ecological site data and filtration, for example, are included, now that makes it easier to link land use and ecological state to the soil properties in that observation. So if you want to brainstorm how to collect this data efficiently or to get it into NRCS, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or the DSP team. In the meantime, those data-rich observations could be part of putting farmers first and providing immediate direct assistance to them. For our partners, we continue to be so thankful for your continued engagement and support of DSP inventories. If you have an idea for a new DSP project or you want to partner on an effort, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. These are our points of contacts per region. And of course, you're also welcome to reach out to the national team. And finally, if you want more information about DSP, our website is a great first stop. It includes our contact list and our official DSP guidance. And with that, just thank you so much. Looking forward to continuing to work with you, hopefully long into the future.
Everyone, thank you so much for having me today. I'm Yu, a postdoc from UCLA. By academic training, I'm an econ PhD focusing on economic history and technological programs. So super excited to talk about my work here, public data infrastructure and agriculture development, historical evidence from soil mapping. Okay, so this project is largely motivated by the fact that real-time data sharing system is almost everywhere in our life. For example, in public health, policymakers and researchers heavily relied on, the public health surveillance or dashboard to monitor the outbreaks of certain disease and give timely responses. In agriculture sector, we also see how precision or digital agriculture use data-based technologies to improve the agriculture productivity. And because, in so many contexts, this data sharing system is still part of the public goods provision, which means they are founded and developed and provided by the government. So this raises a fundamental question for public economists to think about. That is, how do we weigh the costs and benefits of such data infrastructure? In this paper, I'm going to answer this question using the context of historical NCSS program, which can provide a really interesting estimate for the long-run effects of such data infrastructure. So that means the research questions here is, first, does publicly available soil quality information affect local agriculture development? And second, if so, what could be the underlying mechanisms and channels? Okay, so I guess everyone here is quite familiar with that. Like NCSS is the largest systematic nationwide program providing detailed county-based soil quality information by publishing maps, surveys, as well as reports since the very end of 19th century. And according to the claim from its historical bureau, this historical bureau of soils in 1914, the primary goal for the soil survey here is to map, classify, and correlate soils to determine and describe their characteristics, to report on the actual use of being made of the soils and on their adaptation to different types of crops. And it is indicated by the name. NCSS is basically a partnership between different levels of governments and the local agencies. It has been, applied to a wide range of contexts, like use and management of data for farming, tax assessment, determination, highway engineering, as well as the residential development in later decades. So for this project to proceed, I'm going to purely focus on the very first order effect of this soil mapping. That means what happened to the local agriculture outcomes. All right. So for the data part, I use newly digitized NCSS reports, read each of them, and find the timing and the location of each NCSS from 1899 to 1930. I also match this NCSS mapping status to the Census of Agriculture, which provides rich, agriculture outcomes for me to look into. To get a proxy for local agriculture suitability and condition, I used FAO GAEZ data, and eventually I collected some data from the archived experimental stations publications. In terms of the methodology here, I use a statistical method called a difference in difference framework, which exploit the rollout of NCSS across different neighboring counties over time to identify the cause of impacts. That means how NCSS mapping, causes some consequences in a county. For main findings, first of all, I found NCSS is associated with a significant improvement in agriculture revenue. And for the mechanisms, I argue two concrete ones. The first is better soil information can largely increase the farmer's choice decision-making process. That means there was an increase in the precision of crop choice, which means, farmers can better understand the crop suitability and, abandon the less suitable ones. Also, I saw this increased adoption of agriculture technology like fertilizer and machinery. And eventually I saw this expansion of self-owned farmland, which means people were more willing to invest in the land, owned by themselves instead of just rented from others. And the second channel I would say is this NCSS largely, mitigate the coordination frictions across different agencies and help facilitate the institutional-based research activities. So this is measured by an increase in number of research activities directly relevant to soil and fertilizers within this agriculture experimental stations, which provide, extensive extension surveys to local communities and farmers. At the same time, I documented some evidence showing that the provision of better soil quality information can potentially impose the agriculture risk. This is measured by, first, a decline in the local crop biodiversity. And second is that there is a positive correlation between soil erosion and the soil survey status. Okay, so just a few more words about historical background, but I'm pretty sure everyone's sitting here can already are the experts. So the idea of systematically checking the soil quality information stemmed from 1891 and recommended by Mark Harrington. It took, the administrative part almost 8 years to first come up with this NCSS soil survey. 4 initial survey was made in different counties and focusing on the cultivation of tobacco. During the following 2 decades, this NCSS mapping program was quickly diffused around the entire nation. Like by the end of 1930, we saw approximately 1/3 of the counties in the entire nation got their first NCSS map. Here, just to visualize this mapping programs, and which, starting from 1900, only a few counties got their survey. And in contrast, by 1930, we saw, a bunch of counties got NCSS. So this provided rich variation for me to check how they empirically affect the local agriculture outcomes. This is just a very simple example of NCSS showing how this looks like in the early 20th century. Essentially, we can see a county-based soil map is provided, including, the geographic distribution of each soil types. It also includes detailed characteristics of each soil types, including the share, the principal crop cultivated and adopted, as well as the recommended, or sometimes we call them optimal cultivation methods for each crop. And along with this map and detailed description, sometimes we also see a brief introduction about local climate information and agriculture history, see how the average temperature looks like, how the precipitation looks like within that area or county. This is just a snapshot about the Cedar County in Iowa, showing that a particular soil loam is an extensive and valuable agricultural soil. For the operation and distribution of NCSS, this part is largely drawn from other historical materials the reports have read so far. So if you have any insights or suggestions, please feel free to let me know. According to this description, by 1908, the Bureau of Soils itself had on-file requests over and above its capacity to meet. for this soil surveys of 654 additional areas. So it seems like the public attitudes toward NCS is quite positive. For relevant agencies to the 1920s, audit surveys were made cooperatively by the Fed and the state agencies and governments. But starting from 1930, SES started to kick in and focus on different perspectives of soil surveys. That means how to address the soil erosion, largely due to the Dust Bowl issue. And later, these two different surveys would just emerge together during the 1950s. For the distribution part, it seems like the printed county reports for each NCS survey are available and usually free of charge, or just with a few cents. And they are available at a local experimental station, local government offices, as well as the libraries. So for the data part, thanks so much for all the hard work at making this historical NCSS publications available online. I look into each of them and collect the exact timing and location for the surveys. This helped me construct a rich panel documenting this policy change. So here, I constructed treatment group, which means those counties accessing to its very first local soil maps under the NCSS. The control group here, which I used it to, compare with the treatment group, are those neighboring counties sharing the same county border with my treatment counties, but not getting mapped throughout the entire period. To give you a sense of the magnitude, like by the end of 1930, we have 1223 counties with their NCSS map available in place. I then merged this policy data, this NCSS policy data, to the Census of Agriculture to see how they influence the outcome of interest, including like local farmers' investment, choice of crops cultivated, and the very specific crop yields each type. I also look into the reports of agriculture experimental stations and calculate the state level publication counts, highlighting soil and fertilizer as a proxy for research activities. And to get a better sense of county level agriculture suitability, I use the FAO's GAEZ data, which provide a detailed suitability score for cultivating each crop for each county. Okay, so this is just to show you, how the number of newly available NCSS looks over time. We saw this number peaked in the middle of 1910s and declined a little bit during the 1920s because of the First World War as well as the Great Depression. All right, so for sample, I imposed two additional restrictions for my sample. And the first one is we know that NCSS maps can be available at both for individual counties or for a wide range of areas. So for identification concerns, I just focus on a subset of NCSS maps with clear county boundaries, which means I have to job those area-based area-based NCSS surveys. That means I exclude all Western states at that time. I also focus on the first NCSS of each county. Like during the reference period, only a few counties got surveyed twice or multiple times. All right, so this is the identification part, which is essentially a difference in difference framework in terms of statistical interpretation. This can capture the causal effects of NCSS on the outcome of interest. So NCSS on the right-hand side for this regression analysis is an indicator for whether County C has been mapped in year T. And I also include this county fixed effect and year fixed effect respectively to capture some unobserved confounding factors. I also control for like county level population, urban status, market access measures. Essentially, it's like how close you are to, the local market, as well as some climate information. So now let's take a look at the results. So the first table here shows what happened to the agriculture productivity, which is the crop revenue per acre. And across all the columns, across different specifications of my regression analysis, I saw there is a persistent and significant increase in the all crop revenue per acre of the farmland within a county. So this means, indeed, following NCSS, we would expect an improvement in the agriculture productivity. And this is an event study estimates showing how dynamically crop revenue per acre adjusted following the NCSS. And we saw this positive effect lasted for at least 2 decades. And why this can happen? The first mechanisms I would argue is about farmers' choices, which means better flow information largely reduce farmers' uncertainties in agriculture investment. So to capture this idea, I look into crop choice, the adoption of fertilizer and machinery, self-owned farmland, and career choice. And the first mechanisms here, which is essentially drawn from FAO's GAEZ data, is to see how NCSS affect the crop suitability. So by doing a triple difference in difference framework, my result here shows that conditional on having an NCSS map in place, if a crop is identified as a least suitable crop type according to local agriculture condition, the crop farmland specific, cultivating this crop type would decline. So that suggests farmers are pretty smart. After getting better information from the soil maps, they're shifting away from agriculturally, least suitable crop to find better options. The next table shows what happened to other agriculture inputs, ranging from agriculture machinery, the use of fertilizer, the share of self-owned farmland, and also the number of farmers. So across all columns, we saw this significant increase and suggesting soil map lead to an increase in farmers' adoption of new technology, incentivizing farmers to invest in farmland. And also, local farmers are more likely to be there following the NCSS. And there are just more dynamic effects captured by this event study results. Okay, another interesting thing I wanted to mention is after NCSS, I found some interesting interaction with, those physical infrastructure. Or say, here I capture the complementarity between data infrastructure and physical infrastructure. So from prior literature in agriculture econ, we know that better market access can actually improve the agriculture productivity very intuitively. If you know you are close to a market, you have more incentive to just, produce more, right? So I found interestingly, this market access can amplify the positive effect of NCSS. So from the first row here, we saw, if we have NCSS and better market access simultaneously, the improvements in machinery, fertilizer, and self-owned farmland, the crop revenue all go up. Related to the second mechanisms I wanted to argue is NCSS can facilitate the institutional innovation of local agriculture experimental station. So this is, again, I use a state year level panel and run this difference in difference framework again, and found one, we have more NCSS in place, the more likely that local agriculture experiment stations are gonna, focus on, prioritize their research activities relevant to fertilizer and soil. All right. So just a few more words about what happened on the cost side. So for the cost side, I rely on the literature from ecology and try to measure the monoculture risk from the data. So here I use two different indexes. First one is Shannon-Weber index, which capture the crop diversity based on the farmland used for each crop. And the second one is the HHI index, which is constructed based on the value of crop revenue for each crop I in County C in a particular year. By construction, if we saw an increase in both indexes, we're confident to say like the local crop biodiversity would decline. And indeed, I found one have NCSs there, both SWI and HHI just a significantly increase. And this, increase can persistent and very prominent in the long run. All right. The last exercise I did here is to check how, NCSS status is correlated with erosion risk during the 1930s. So this is measured by two, outcome of interest. One is whether there was any soil erosion in County C during the 1930s. The other one is the share of eroded county land in County C during that period. And across all columns, we see this positive and significant correlation. All right, some concluding remarks. So in this paper, I think I showed two key takeaways. Like first, sharing public data infrastructure data about agriculture inputs like soil quality can indeed improve local agriculture productivity, but at the cost of decreasing crop biodiversity. The primary channel include reducing asymmetric information among farmers and the coordination frictions among public agencies. The policy implication here are just twofold. First, I think this can be definitely generalized to other sectors such as, healthcare surveillance, transportation data monitoring, and essentially the resource management in contemporary setting. The second one is public information and data infrastructure can have both pros and cons in production. That means, especially when we face resource constraints there, policymakers should be very careful in, putting this public data infrastructure in place, carefully weigh the costs and benefits. For some future work on my end, I think I'm gonna keep, doing wildfire implications, trying to capture the costs and benefits in detail, and then and think about how this database technology can shape local government decisions, improve their policy making regarding land management, or how to help determine tax base and rates. Okay, so that's all I wanted to talk about. Thank you so much for having me, and let me know if you have any questions or suggestions. Thanks.
Hey everybody, Greg Taylor, Senior Soil Scientist for Special Projects. I want to talk to you today about how we use coastal zone soil survey, or how we get our projects done through building partnerships. Now, the reason we build partnerships is because of the huge area that we cover. It's impossible for us to do this by ourselves. You can see here, there's just a current map showing where our projects are ongoing or requests have come in. Here's the list. This is our top 25 list of projects that we have. We have more than that, but honestly I just stopped at 25 for this presentation. But you can see these requested projects cover a very, very large area. But not only do we have a long list of projects, but we have a long list of partners and professionals that we work with. Much of this list has come through successful collaboration, through successful partnerships that we've built. But one of the reasons we do this is first and foremost is we work for the NRCS, so we're going to support NRCS or the farmers, ranchers, those conservation programs, which we do. But then outside of that, this is just a shortened list of the folks that we work for. But why do we do that? Well, it supports our challenge, our charge, if you will, which is to keep soil survey relevant and expand our customer base. So that's one of the reasons Coastal Zone Soil Survey is out there. It provides support, but it also expands that base. But it is a blueprint in partnerships because it's vital. There's only 13 of us covering this large area with this long list of projects and the partnerships and all that we've established. So again, it's more than we can handle again with 13 of us. So just giving you some background. When something comes to us, people reach out and say they're interested or talk to us at a meeting or whatever. That's one thing, to come up to us and just say, hey, have you ever considered going to this bay or this sound or whatever? We only go if there's if people are serious. If first of all, if there is a need, there is a partnership, a coalition there that would support us being there, but also can we provide something that is useful? Is Coastal Zone Soil Survey going to help you with a problem, or is it really needed? Would it be useful and used? And then from there, we require every group to come together and put it in writing. We have to have something in writing, whether it's emailed or mailed, and we usually get both, to be quite honest. But we want that in writing. We want it to, when we can control how they come to us, we want them coming through the state conservation. So first and foremost, the states are aware and that they can support that partnership, because again, we work for the NRCS, and so we want the NRCS involved and know what we're doing. So, but no, they don't always happen that way. Some of them just come through other channels or through other avenues, and we don't always get to dictate how they come to us, but we do get them. We require that. And so as I started building this presentation, I started looking at, what makes for an effective or successful partnership. How do I convey that? And so I found the 3 C's of effective partnerships on a simple Google search, and I thought I'd run with that. But as I got to thinking about it, I thought more about, what is the communication, what's successful communication? It's communication with results. And a lot of how projects come to us is through an already existing successful partnership. A couple of examples is Long Island Sound. Long Island Sound is a $9.4 billion per year industry: fisheries, oyster production, aquaculture, tourism. So it's a big deal there. And then so this project came about as a result of another successful project, where the Billion Oyster Project, where for parts of that of Jamaica Bay in New York, they were using our Coastal Zone Soil Survey product to make certain decisions. Based off that, word got around. A senator heard about it, funding followed, and I guess you could say the rest is history. But throughout that, we relied on we had 40 different partnerships, groups, individuals that helped us through that. A lot of times they helped us from everything in the field to permissions, to permitting, to places to park our equipment. So it's a very successful partnership, one we're very proud of. And then also Rob Tunstead and myself were out helping Penn State pull some cords. We were updating our soil survey product. They wanted some information so that they could run it through the lab for studies they were interested in. A conversation was had on the boat, and then about how Coastal Zone helps with different things. And oyster restoration was a topic that was discussed at length. We left there. Several months later, those folks actually was in another conversation with Florida Wildlife Commission staff. Told them about us. Well, it just so happens Apalachicola was under a moratorium while they allowed the native oyster population to recover, and then also the managers and all that was in charge of Apalachicola were challenged to come up with a plan for sustainability of the oyster population within Apalachicola. They thought the soil survey, our Coastal Zone Soil Survey, would be a great base of information to build upon. So they wanted us to get out before 2026, which we're currently trying to do. And then also, though, one thing, if you want to know why, is Apalachicola Bay, 90% of the wild oysters in Florida come out of that one bay, and 10% of the U.S. supply comes out of that bay. So it's a huge aquaculture, oyster production bay, very, very important for the fishery and for the local and state and even national economy. So that kind of communication, one successful project led to another. And so what do we start talking about? Well, what's communication look like as a project starts? Well, it's pretty simple, but you got to be clear. You got to start setting that good foundation. Who can help you in the field? Who needs training? We're logistical support. We're going to park equipment. Where can we stage expectations, in-kind services? Not uncommon for us to work with universities to say they want us to pull a few extra cords for them so that they can support a thesis, some research that they're doing for usually a student's thesis, doctorate, something like that, and they're going to run that data through their lab. Well, we'll say, okay, well, great, we'll be glad to do that. Hey, but you don't mind giving us lab assistance as well. We'll pull the cords, you run the lab data, and that's how that usually grows. Just one of the in-kind services, but that's the type of communication that you have beginning. Lodging, dockage, where can we park our boats on the water if possible, any funding. Hey, are we going to engage the public? We want that. We like that. We like keeping the public informed. I'll go into detail on a little bit on why, because the bottom line of it is we get a lot of attention wherever we go, whether we want it or not. And then the scope of work, how far into these bays and sounds do we need to be looking? So what's the scope of the project? But then also you have the communication throughout it. What's the progress? Here's what we've accomplished. Any issues that we're having? Our partners happy? What's their feedback? Any adjustments needed? Public informed and happy. There's a lot of things though that come in there where partnerships will say there's a big fishing tournament coming up. Well, we need to stay away from that. Certain boat routes or maybe certain areas. Maybe there's hunting season, again, certain fishing seasons. Are we making necessary adjustments? Are we keeping them happy? Are we staying in the areas we should and staying away from the areas we need to? There's also changes that affect the project. One of them that comes to mind is migratory birds. We've had several times where birds who really aren't native to the area have migrated through and nested there. Well, when say Fish and Wildlife or someone else notices that, we're made aware of it. We stay out of there. We stay away from those nesting areas during those times. So again, we're being informed. We're talking to each other, and but these are changes that can affect the project. But it's also how we change our daily activities. And then there's communications as a project ends. Did we meet the needs? Do these interpretations help? This is not a one and done operation, so we want to make sure that what the taxpayers paid for is of use, right? So we typically we try to meet with partners. We try to showcase everything we did at the end of it, literally pulling up web soil survey, working through an interp, showing them how to use this information, how they can export it, how it can become part of their local database. We use our GIS and soil data quality specialists that we have on staff to walk people through all this. We do it. So anyway, it's usually a big meeting, sometimes in person, sometimes virtually, where we showcase the end product. Then we want to make sure that it's useful. And then we want to thank everybody for their assistance. And then the other C is collaboration. And NRCS is unique in that we have engineers, soil scientists, conservationists, ecologists, and the list goes on of experts. Then we provide that technical service to farmers, ranchers, producers, taxpayers, even other federal agencies. We are the soils experts for the U.S. government, so we're out there, and the NRCS is set up uniquely to support that. It's a collaborative agency. But once you have these collaborators, use them, make them, give them ownership, get them involved in it, trust them. Be prepared as NRCS employees. Some days you want to lead, some days you're going to follow, some days you're going to help. Have a plan, know the plan, know how to incorporate other people into that plan, whether they show up that morning or they're coming. You want to build excitement. We have long days. It's tiring. Sometimes you have to be a cheerleader, but you want people to be excited to work with you, to partner with us, and you want to make something that we're all proud of, because it is a commitment. You lead by example. Again, long days or whatever, but you have to be the one leading from the front, You want to show that this is a true partnership, not just an NRCS project, but it is a collaborative partnership where everybody gets gets the praise and has the same good feeling once it's done. For the NRCS, don't be lazy. If you started this, you built this partnership, don't be lazy about it. I tell my folks to treat it like it's your own business. Imagine complaints, imagine the phone not ringing anymore, then you would go out of business. We need to do the same thing, so we need to deliver. You also need to be cognizant of the effect you're having on the community. We show up with our boats, our traveling circus, we sometimes call it. We are seen at gas stations, restaurants, hotels, out of water at boat ramps. Always be good representation, not only of the NRCS, but of that partnership, that collaboration that you've been part of building. So don't let the team down, don't let the NRCS down, don't let the taxpayer down. Final thoughts, again, we cover a large area with limited staff, so partnerships are vital, they're necessary, they're practically mandatory. Nothing wrong with making friends and having fun. It helps get other people excited about it. When you're done, though, leave everybody educated. They knew more than they once did, impressed with you, with your work ethic, but with the usefulness of the product that taxpayers have entrusted you to create. Go above and beyond, exceed expectations. Always be able to tell everybody's a taxpayer that you meet. Be able to tell anybody with any background without using big soul words and jargon. Keep the dirt nerd out of it. Keep it simple, but be able to explain it to everybody. And then smile knowing you did a good job. It's a great, best feeling in the world. So quickly I went through this. That's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, you can reach out. Thank you again for your attention, for listening. And with that, I'll end my presentation. Thank you.
My name is Alicia Leadham, and I am an instructor here at Oregon State University. However, today I'm going to be speaking with you as a longtime member of the Oregon Society of Soil Scientists, or OSSS as we call it. Today I want to share why I believe organizations like OSSS are not only relevant, but vital to the strength, connection, and longevity of soil science across the country. Professional societies offer more than continuing education or a journal subscription. They can offer a sense of identity, connection, and collaboration across sectors and generations. Whether you're deep in a research lab, digging in a soil pit, or teaching in a classroom, societies help to bring us together under one shared purpose. While preparing for this presentation, I did some digging into the history of soil science societies across the United States. And what I found was that the peak of the societies were back in the 1970s to the 1980s, and this may have been because there was a large push in the early 1970s from the tri-societies for states to create regional or state-level organizations to bring professional soil scientists together. A lot of those original organizations were tied really closely to the NRCS office or land-grant universities in their area. But over time, as people retired and some of that original knowledge was lost, there's been shifts in funding. And then people are just communicating across the state and across regions more directly through digital communication. And so the necessity for these societies has shifted. And in some states, they've completely fizzled out. Other states have merged their societies together. So instead of having a state level organization, they will have a multiple state level organization or a multi-state level organization. And then there's a few states across the country that still have very strong and impressive and active organizations to this date. Here I've created a map where I did some online sleuthing, and the states with the green stars are states that appear to have active, engaged organizations to this date. There are places I was able to find a website or a Facebook group that had information that had been posted within the last 6 months. The states with the dark gray stars are states that I could find a website for, but they clearly were defunct and nobody was keeping up with them anymore. Now, this is not to say that these other states do not have organizations. I just wasn't able to find information about them on the internet. So if you know that there are organizations or state professional societies in some of these states, please drop them into the comments. And if you have a link to their website, I would love to get it. I'm really hoping to connect more societies with each other, and that would be a great way to do it. The Oregon Society of Soil Scientists was founded back in the 1970s, actually in 1974. So it has been active for over 50 years. Over time, it's had to adapt the structure, right? But it has stuck to its core mission to promote soil science in Oregon. In fact, I was able to locate the original 1974 Constitution of the Society, which is listed here on the bottom. And I was shocked to see that the original objectives are almost entirely in line with the current mission, which I've added here on the right side of the screen. The final objective has been accomplished, but I wasn't successful in determining when exactly it happened that in the state there was a state registration formed for professional soil scientists. I've really depended on OSSS to be my professional home since graduate school, and I've seen firsthand how it can create community, foster learning, and keep soil science alive and well. Our two main events were originally called the Winter Meeting and the Summer Tour. However, our current board just recently decided to remove the seasonal portions of those names because the active fire season in Oregon has grown, and many of the current board members are federal employees who are completely committed during the fire season. This was conflicting a lot with our regular meeting dates. These meetings tend to combine rigor with fun, and we do that really well. So learning goes both ways. Students are able to come and get hands-on mentorship from professionals from across the state. And those professionals, some active, some retired, stay energized by working with these young students who are excited and learning, and also are just connected to each other and to new folks coming into the state and into the discipline. This is a picture of a map from our website that just shows histories of our events over time. I think these go back to, the early 2000s, up to maybe 2023. We haven't updated it recently, but you can see just within those 20 years or so, we've been all over the state, right? There's obviously lots of action right around Oregon State University and a lot more action around Salem and Portland because those are the large populated areas in our state, but we also try to hit other regions. We have such a vast variety of ecosystems in Oregon, all the way from the coast to the mountains, to the valleys, to the high desert, that there is just loads and loads of different types of soils to see, and we try and hit those with all of our tours over time. In our society, we recently restructured the way that we are doing membership in the hopes of increasing engagement. So I did some digging. I found the original 1974 Constitution for the Oregon Society of Soil Scientists, and in that I found that they had 4 different membership types. You could be a member if you had a Bachelor's of Science in Soil Science or another degree program with enough credits to qualify, quote, as a soil scientist as defined and specified in the Federal Civil Service Register. Students and others that were interested in the aims and goals of the society could become associate members upon approval of the membership committee, and sustaining members could support the society through a financial contribution. Honorary members were nominated by the executive committee and approved by the membership committee. Now, since I have been a part of the organization, we have always had 3 membership levels: professional membership, which is often called regular membership. We had student members, and then lifetime members. So membership was issued to you when you paid your annual dues. I think this is common in a lot of societies. Our due systems was $50 for regular members, $30 for student members, and then you could become a lifetime member if you had a one-time payment of $500. Our new system has removed this annual need to pay for membership dues. So we no longer have membership dues. The new system is that you will become a member if you have come to one of our events. If you come to a winter meeting, or the annual meeting, if you come to the field tour, then you will be a member for the following year after that activity that you were engaged in. Our hopes with this was to get people to come and actually be involved in activities. We didn't want people to just pay for memberships and then never be there, because it didn't really mean anything to us. So we essentially just swallowed the cost of that membership, the annual membership, into the cost for our events now. So now it's a little bit more expensive, but you won't have to pay those annual dues. One of the goals of our society is to reach out to the public, right? We need to amplify soil science beyond our own circles. So that happens through volunteering for things like Envirothon or Outdoor School. We do public talks whenever we can when we're in a new community for our annual meetings. We are sometimes invited to give talks. We try and follow up and find volunteers to do that when possible. We have an annual scholarship every year for college students, and we also do a lot of fundraising and supporting of the soil judging team at Oregon State University. And recently we've had an action committee get formed, and the goal of this action committee is to be more involved in legislative proposals related to environmental and land use across the state. So this is giving us a voice in shaping the future of land stewardship. It helps to build bridges across science and policy, and it's a good way to keep other members engaged who maybe don't want to be on the board but would like to do something to help the society. The Sharpshooter is our society's publication. It was originally published, the first one came out in 1977, and like many things, it's changed shape over time. So it used to be printed out in color and mailed to all of the members across the state. Then there was the option to receive it electronically instead, and eventually it's converted over to an entirely digital publication. It's member written and full of practical updates, ponderings, and insights. Sometimes you might even find a recipe or a book review of a young adult book, maybe a graphic novel about soil. It keeps us informed and connected across seasons and roles and with what is going on within the society and beyond. For me, the most important aspect of this society is the relationships that have been built through it. Some of the most impactful connections in my professional life came from OSSS, friendships that span academia, government, and industry. The relationships built in soil pits and field tours are what give our field its human strength. And I hope that through these collaborations and societies, we can continue to connect and diversify our knowledge and our connections around our states. Just as OSSS thrives on internal connection, there's untapped potential in linking soil science societies across state and regional lines. Imagine if we had coordinated field weeks, joint student competitions, or a shared voice in national soil policy. These kinds of networks could reinvigorate smaller societies and help build resilience across our profession. Apologies for the AI-created image. It was tricky to get something that even kind of looked like soil scientists, but there we are. Our society's thrived because of its commitment, its adaptability, the leadership development, and our belief that everyone, whether that's students, teachers, our surveyors, or researchers, we all belong in this community. We often say that our professional society is for soil professionals and soil enthusiasts, which honestly I feel like I'm more fitting into these days than a professional. I have a background in soil science. I have a master's. I love soils. I love being out in the field. But I'm currently teaching a class where I only have one lesson every term that's focused on soils, and everything else is broader environmental science. So OSSS gives me an opportunity to come back together to keep up with what's going on and to keep me active and excited. And if we want to keep soil science vibrant, we need to keep creating spaces like this for people to come together. In the end, what I really want to say is it's time to get involved. So if you've stepped back from your society, come back. If you're active, stay active. bring in students, invite colleagues. These organizations only thrive when we show up for each other, and when we do, we keep soil science strong, connected, and ready for the future. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Here's some contact information both for the Oregon Society of Soil Scientists, but also my email address if you would like to connect with me. One other thing that has been amazing when it's worked out is sometimes at our annual meetings, somebody within the society will plan a follow-up activity to do after the meeting. So this picture, for example, we went backpacking in the Wallowas after one of our meetings, and we spent 4 days with other members hiking and exploring places you can't see unless you hike into them. And it was gorgeous and stunning. So get involved. I hope to hear from you and to learn what's going on across the country. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Hello, my name is Curtis Munger. I'm Professor Emeritus at New Mexico State University. From 2015 to 2021, I was the national leader of soil survey standards at the NRCS. I would like to make 2 points during this presentation. One is to briefly review the history of international contributions to soil taxonomy, and two, to look at soil taxonomy as a useful tool in agriculture and environmental science. A good place to start is with Marbut and his international exchange of ideas. So Marbut was hired by Whitney in 1910 to lead the soil survey efforts. Marbut had attended international conferences and was aware of the work that the Russian pedologists had done in the late 1800s. Dokuchayev, of course, the 5 soil forming factors, subversive, the zonal soils, the intrazonal soils, and the azonal soils. And Glinka, who summarized a lot of that thinking in his book, 1914, The Great Soil Groups of the World and Their Development. So Marbut teaches himself German so that he can translate Glinka's work. Glinka's work, of course, was written in Russian, but it had already been translated into German. So Marbut translates it and basically comes up with this map looking at the soil horizons as opposed to the parent materials. So the upper horizons, the A and the B horizons, are of primary importance because they are the product of processes set in place by the 5 soil forming factors. This is in contrast to Whitney's map in 1909, which is primarily a physiography map looking at the different types of parent material. So in addition to the soil texture in the upper couple of feet, which was very much important during those early surveys because they were focused on crop production, in addition to the texture, parent material, was it loess? Was it residuum from limestone, residuum from igneous rock? Was it glacial till? Was it river alluvium? And so forth. So Marbut's appreciation of soils as a product of the 5 soil forming factors gives the philosophy of mapping for the next, well, even today. And it was passed on to Kellogg, Charles Kellogg, who then takes the concepts. It's apparent in his 1936 publication on the development and significance of the great soil groups of the United States, where he looks at Marbut's pedocalves and pedalfurs and then applies the zonal and intrazonal, uses a lot of terminology directly from the Russian literature and Western European literature, Solinchocks, Solinettes, and so forth. This then is built into the 1938 classification, looking at the zonal soils, meaning that given enough time, a soil will acquire features of bioclimatic zones. But within those bioclimatic zones, there are special local situations that give rise to different soil types, the intrazonal, and then there are the azonal that are very similar regardless of what bioclimatic zone you're in. Those are today's intersols. So during the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, into the early 60s, it is this philosophy that prevails in terms of soil classification, which is very much inherited from an international collaboration. An example of the zonal, intrazonal, and azonal is the 1964 map of the soils of the Western United States. The Green Revolution. So, in terms of international soil science, we hear a lot about, of course, plant breeding, the pioneering work that Norman Borlaug did with breeding wheat varieties, and of course, the synthetic fertilizers, the irrigation, the pesticides, the mechanization, all the advances in agricultural research that went in to boost food production in the mid 20th century. But in there as well is soil survey and understanding which soils respond to various management practices across the landscape. You can see this taking place by after World War II. Charles Kellogg writes some really interesting articles for the Washington Post about Russian soil science and about food production in general. Then he expands into Africa, looking at the tropical soils and working with FAO, producing publications on food production and potential arable soils of the world. So that is all happening after World War II during the 50s. But then in 1950, it's realized that the classification system at that time is insufficient. Number one, it's not quantitative enough. Number two, there's overlap between the different taxa. And basically, it's realized that they need to start fresh. And so, realizing that they can't do it all at once, they resolve to do it in steps or approximations. So, regarding international activity and collaboration, by the third approximation, there was progressively more international activity. But in 1957, it was realized that if soils are to have their own name that will identify them within a polygon as being unique, there's a lot that needs to be packed into that information, into that name. And this is, familiar to all soil scientists and many other scientists as well. If you look at the history of that, article written in 1963 by John Heller, who was a professor of classics, Greek and Latin at the University of Illinois, working with Guy Smith. And he writes that in 1957, this is the fifth approximation, Dr. Smith proposed that names of orders should end in ped, suborders in zem, great groups in sol. I had a different suggestion, Heller says. Professor Travernay, who was a very prominent pedologist in Belgium, and Professor Leemans, who was another professor of classics, had their own suggestions. But somehow, at our first conference in Ghent, we hit upon the solution, which is still in use, and basically going from right to left, starting with the very general concepts and getting more specific through the suborder, great group, subgroup, and family. Then soil taxonomy, after a couple of supplements published in 1975, and it's still recognized that a greater international contribution can be made. So, beginning in the late 70s, there was a huge grant that was supplied by the Agency for International Development, the USAID, and it was the Soil Management Support Service. And these are the PIs, the principal investigators: Terry Cook, Hari S. Warren, Dick Arnold was the lead PI, and John Kimball. And basically, the focus was to incorporate much greater activity and knowledge of international colleagues and international agencies. There was a technology transfer component to it, and probably the main goal was to improve the potential soil survey interpretations for agricultural development. And this is what came out of it and got incorporated into the 1999 version, the second edition of soil taxonomy, on low activity clays, oxysols, soil moisture, vertisols, iridosols, andisols, photosols, aquatic conditions. So, taxonomy came from international partnerships, and today, consequently, it still has applicability to international partnerships, especially as a tool. And to illustrate this, a few years ago in 2020, the International Union of Soil Science, there was an effort to, the question was, given these different disciplines in soil science, what contribution can each make to sustainable agriculture? And I was the chair at that time of soil classification. And you think, what does soil classification do in a very general sense? So it deals with soils in space, that is, their distribution across the landscape, and it deals with soils in time, whenever you look at how soils develop in a chronos sequence. So, given these two aspects, soils and space, here are some examples of WRB, the World Reference Base field trips, looking at various soils: Mexico, Iceland, Spain, Japan, to really capture in a name what the soils are in terms of their physical properties, their chemical properties, and their biological properties. And for example, these are WRB taxa, but very translatable into soil taxonomy taxa that, again, pack a lot of information in that name that tells you pretty much exactly what's inside a polygon. So the other aspect is soils in time. And again, that's the chronos sequence. That's the realization of the documentation of how soils go from fresh parent material into highly developed soils with time, and knowing that trajectory and also observing how treatments can impact soils, predictions can be made. So, for example, how are soils going to respond to climate change? Well, it depends on which soil you're talking about. Erosion of soils with hard pans. A lot of information can be obtained there about which soils are vulnerable and which ones are more resilient. Desertification, salinization, catastrophic forest fires, anthropogenic modification of the landscape, such as stone wall terraces. What does that do to soil types? All of this can be predicted. So you can imagine that in this Syrian society, 200 years BC, there could very well have been someone, now would call him a pedologist or a soil taxonomist or a soil scientist, that would warn these soils are shallow over bedrock. And once those soils are eroded, not only do you not have the chance for regenerative agriculture, the water is gone in terms of the springs. The water is gone in terms of supporting forest and other natural ecosystems. So the fact that soil as a tool, soil taxonomy as a tool, yes, it's been used as a tool. Yes, we understand soils in space. Yes, we can predict how soils will respond. This has been going on for some time, but knowing that we have these tools, we can continue to apply them to new issues, not only agricultural issues, but environmental issues such as biodiversity. Thank you.